Hey, we're just outside the old city walls of Jerusalem. And the building behind me has an upstairs room that many people believe sits on the site on which the Last Supper occurred. Now, that building wasn't here in the first century during the days of Jesus. The Romans leveled the city of Jerusalem in 70 AD. But then a group of Jewish believers built a building on the site that they believed the Last Supper had occurred. That building, in turn, was destroyed by the Persians in the 600s, and then a church was built in the 12th century, and that upper room was added in the 14th century. So did the Last Supper happen there? Well, not in that building, but it's probable that it did happen somewhere close to here, and even possible that that building occupies the site of the Last Supper. But rather than focusing on the location of that meal, think with me for a moment of something very significant that happened at that meal. We read in John chapter 13 that Jesus stood up from the meal, and then he took off his outer garment. And he wraps a towel around his waist and then pours water into a basin. And then he begins to wash his disciples' feet, drying their feet with the towel. Now think about that with me. It's hours before the crucifixion, and Jesus is washing the dirty feet of his students. God in human form, a foot washer. And so in this series, Doubter's Guide to Jesus, we've been able to look at so many incredible facets of Jesus' character and identity. Jesus is teacher, Jesus is healer, Jesus is Christ. Today, let's have a conversation about Jesus as servant. And I am so gonna miss that music. Hey, so glad you're here today as we wrap up this series called Doubter's Guide to Jesus. And I hope you enjoyed some of the videos. Our desire was to bring a taste of Israel to the congregation of Ada Bible Church, and just drawing us back into the culture, the geography, the terrain, and the customs. And so over the course of the series, several times, people have sought me out and said, you know, when you were over there, how large was your camera crew? And so let me show you my camera crew. My camera crew was Mike Ludema. This is Ronnie, who was our driver, and we had a driver so that we could focus on the material and not stress out about getting from point A to point B around cities in a foreign country. And so Mike operated the 2 cameras and sound, and so our goal was to bring a solid product, but at the same time to travel fast and to travel light. And so I think we achieved that. So Mike, I don't know what room you're in right now, but can you just thank Mike for his work throughout the series? All right, and today as we laser in on the last part on Jesus as servant, let's begin with a question, and you will have an advantage if you overdose on classic rock. All right, a classic rock station. So here we go. Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, the song is Free Fallin'. He starts the song with these words: she's a good girl, loves her mama, and then continues with loving 5 other things. What are they? You have 10 seconds, work together. All right. Let's listen and see who got them all.
She's a good girl, loves her mama, loves Jesus, in America too. She's a good girl, is crazy about Elvis, loves horses, and her boyfriend too.
All right, did anybody get them all? Anybody? We have a prize. No, we don't.
Yes, you can watch this sermon again online for free, like everyone else. There's your prize. All right, here's Free Fallen. She's a good girl, loves her mama, loves Jesus and America too. She's a good girl, crazy about Elvis, loves horses and her boyfriend too. And what captured my attention about those opening lyrics of Free Fallen is that Jesus just kind of gets mashed in with everything else. Sure, Jesus is cool, but he's cool in the way that, affection for family, affection for who she's hanging out with at the time, her favorite artist or band, horses, patriotism. It all just kind of gets mashed together. Now, my theory about this is that over time, our vision of who Jesus is can really get blurred, foggy. In fact, I'm convinced that often when people come to Jesus, when people respond to Jesus, it's not Jesus that they're responding to at all, but a caricature of this smashed up Jesus. And I'm also confident that often when people walk away from Christ, walk away from Jesus or walk away from church or walk away from the Christian faith, often it's not Jesus that they're actually walking away from. They're walking away from a caricature of Jesus. Quite frankly, they're walking away from a vision of Jesus that is not a vision worth having, and it's not a faith worth having. And so throughout the 12 weeks of this series, where we've taken the person of Jesus and just turned it and just said, okay, Jesus is teacher, Jesus is healer, Jesus is Christ, Jesus is Caesar, Jesus as servant. What can we do in a season at Ada Bible Church to get clearer, to get much better vision, our vision cleared about who Jesus is, and what he was asking from us and the kind of life that he was calling us to. Now, this deal about our vision getting blurry about who Jesus is, just understand, it's not a new problem. It's not a uniquely American problem, and it's not necessarily just a problem or challenge of our century. My friends, right out of the gate, as Jesus is leading his 12 disciples, there is considerable confusion about exactly who he is and about what he desires for them. And so today, as we drop in on Jesus, he's traveling with the 12 disciples, and we know where he is, we know where he's been, we know where he's going. It's the last week of Jesus' life. He is up here in Galilee, northern Israel, and he's traveled down the Jordan River Valley. He and his disciples are about to reach the city of Jericho. And from there, they'll take a right, a west, and they'll travel up to Jerusalem, and he will be executed in Jerusalem. And it is as he and his disciples are approaching Jericho that two of his disciples break out of the pack of 12. They're brothers, their names are James and John, and they approach Jesus with a request. And this is the request. Let one of us sit at your right and another at your left in your glory. Jesus, if it's not too much to ask, just could one of us sit on your right hand and could one of us sit on your left hand when you assume your power and authority and come into glory? Now, this is a conversation about jockeying for position. It is about positioning, it is about posturing, and it is about pushing others out. And Jesus is going to use this request and the brawl that it spawns in order to have a conversation with his closest friends, his disciples, about what it means to cultivate a mind and a heart of humble servanthood. So it's going to come out of this conversation is a phenomenal conversation about Jesus as servant, but more than that, how he calls his followers to lives of humble servanthood. Now, before we look at the conversation, just a sobering moment here. This is massive not only for the person that you are becoming, this is massive for the people that we are becoming. As a church, as a faith community, this is massive for us. If someone asks a question, hey, where is Ada Bible Church? There are two accurate answers to that question. One is Ada Bible Church is here. I mean, you could point to our 4 campuses where people gather on weekends, but also gather during the week for different events. You say, well, Ada Bible Church is here. And that's accurate because those are gathering points. And let's just say that when we gather, whether there is a prevailing spirit of arrogant self-interest, or whether there is a prevailing spirit of humble servanthood, this is just huge in the people that we are becoming. That's an accurate answer to the question, where is Ada Bible Church? Of course, another accurate answer would be this: Ada Bible Church is here, and those dots actually represent your homes. We take your addresses and we can put them in, and what this means is that Ada Bible Church gathered is in 4 different campuses. Ada Bible Church scattered, we're talking thousands of homes in hundreds of neighborhoods. You are deployed during the week into countless families, factories, offices, job sites, schools, exercise facilities, hospitals, which means that between weekends, there are literally hundreds of thousands of one-on-one interactions between you and other individuals. It is not an exaggeration to say that whether we walk through our week with a feeling that is kind of self-focused, self-centered, self-obsessed, versus just this, I'm here to serve, I'm a humble servant, this is huge. Not only in the person that you are becoming, but in the people we are becoming. Whether, this next map, whether it is Ada Bible Church as reflected here, or whether it's Ada Bible Church gathered or Ada Bible Church scattered, it's a big deal. And so my plea with you today is that you would open your heart to the disruptive message that Jesus shared with his disciples about his value on humble servanthood. A conversation is about to unfold between Jesus and his disciples. It is a conversation in 3 parts, 3-part conversation. First part of the conversation had to do with this: 2 thrones. If it's not too much to ask, we would just love the throne on the right and the throne on the left. And we want to get to a yes before anybody else asks for those. All right? Mark chapter 10, verse 37 is where our story begins. They came to Jesus and they say, hey, we want to ask you something. Please say yes. We're going to ask you a question. Please say yes. And now if your kids did that, you'd go, yeah, what do you want? And Jesus said, yeah, what do you want? And they replied, let one of us sit on your right and the other on your left in your glory. Now, we have an advantage that they did not have. We know that Jesus is going to Jerusalem, and we have the story of the crucifixion. That's easier for us to see because we're looking back in time. It was harder for them to see moving into Jerusalem. And so we have an advantage they didn't have. They think he's going to be announced king, that he's going to set up an administration, and that because they are the 12 apostles, the 12 disciples, that they will have key positions in his government. And so they say, can we just have chair number 1 and chair number 2? And Jesus says, you have no clue what you're asking. The way he asks the question is this. He says, are you willing to drink from the same cup that I'm about to drink from? Jesus knows what is ahead in the next few days, and he says, you so don't get what's going to happen in Jerusalem. Are you able to drink out of the cup that I'm about to drink from? What Jesus is saying this: do you really want the positions on my left and on my right? What's going to go down in Jerusalem? I don't think you want to be on my left and on my right. What they had imagined is this: a throne of some sort. And listen, there's an ability to look at James and John requests and say, listen, we want to be on your left and on your right. You just go, what a couple of idiots. I mean, when will they get it? I think it's healthier to pause for a moment and just say, okay, what did they really want? So let's move away from this elaborate throne here. And it's kind of simple, but just look at this chair here. I say this is the chair upon which Jesus talked about the kingdom coming, presents himself as being the coming king. If you've got the chair to his right, if you have the chair to his left, you have his ear. Literally, you have his ear. You're the top advisors. You're the chief counselors. And there's what I would call importance by association. Other people befriend you to get to him. You have his ear. Now, we understand the concept of this. It's wildly different, but in U.S. government, any sitting president has a responsibility surrounding himself with a cabinet, president's cabinet. And president's cabinet is made up of various positions. Secretary of the Treasury, Secretary of Transportation, Secretary of Education, Secretary of Health and Human Services, Secretary of State, Chief of Staff. But all of the cabinet members do not have equal access to the President of the United States. The Secretary of State, the Chief of Staff may have greater access than, say, the Secretary of Health and Human Services. You understand what I'm saying here? So even though you're all sitting around the table, there are some that have the ear of the president in a way that others may not. This is what they're after. I believe they're after importance. I believe they are after influence. And they say, if it's not too much to ask, could you favor us with the seats to the left and the seats to the right? And I think it's important to spend time on this moment, because if I look at it kind of like this and say, okay, what did they want? You go, well, they wanted the right-hand seat and the left-hand seat. No. What did they want? I'd say they wanted to be recognized. They wanted to be seen. They wanted to be respected. They wanted to be admired. They wanted to be influential. They wanted to be heard. They wanted to be known. They wanted to be important. Can you identify with any of those words? I mean, who wants to be invisible, unimportant, non-influential, unseen, unrespected, unadmired? I mean, as you look at their request and you look at this list, perhaps you can identify with maybe 1, 2, or 8 of those. If you boil those down to one word, the word that Jesus is going to use is this. He's going to use the word greatness, because this toggles into a conversation about how to find true greatness in life. I think he just wanted to be great, and they're defining great as being seen, as being recognized, as being important, as being heard, as being influential. You just look at that list. I look at that list and go, that looks normal. Does that look normal to you? I just want to be seen, I want to be heard, I want to be important. But when they approached Jesus, and by the way, there were 3 disciples in Jesus' inner circle. There's got 12 disciples, but the inner circle was Peter, James, and John. In asking Jesus for the seats to the right and the left, one person is not in this conversation. How do you think Peter might have felt about this when he catches wind that this conversation takes place? And he will. But what happens here is that they really felt a need to be more recognized, more seen, more respected, more admired, more influential, more heard, better known, and more important than the other 10. There is something about this conversation that is intrinsically competitive. That is, in order for them to be on the inside, by necessity, it means pushing other people to the outside. Now, a great Christian writer of the last century, C.S. Lewis, or like the Chronicles of Narnia series, one of his most profoundly helpful books was this little slim volume called Mere Christianity. C.S. Lewis has a little section in Mere Christianity, and the section is called, ready? The Great Sin. Now, if you're reading through Mere Christianity and you see a section called The Great Sin, I don't know what spins through your mind about what the great sin is. But for Lewis, he said, oh, no. The great sin is pride. It's arrogance. It's self-inflation. It's not only rising up, but it's rising up by pushing others down. So I just want to share with you just a quote by Lewis in Mere Christianity. He starts by saying, pride is inherently competitive. And then he goes, pride gets no pleasure out of having something, only out of having more of it than the next man. And then he goes on to say, we say people are proud of being rich or clever or good looking, but they are not. They are proud of being richer, cleverer, or better looking than others. Pride is inherently competitive. No. It's not enough to be rich, good looking, successful. I have to be more successful. I have to be richer. I have to be better looking. Dads, try this on for size. Your daughter is going to her first formal event in high school, and you're driving, you drive her to the event, and after you say, honey, you were so beautiful. Yes. And then you go, everyone there was beautiful. What? What kind of compliment is that? I don't want to be beautiful among many. It's just this, this is what arrogance does. It has a tendency to feel in a desire to rise and to succeed and to excel. In order to have a feeling of a superiority, it demands that I recognize inferiority. This is the conversation that's taking place between Jesus and his disciples after 3 years of mentoring them. It's the week before the crucifixion, and this is blowing up, and it does blow up. I don't know whether all 10 disciples overheard this or whether there were just a couple that then wandered over to the group and go, you'll never believe what I just heard. James and John just asked Jesus for chair number 1 and throne number 1 and throne number 2. You gotta be kidding me. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, these are the saints. They probably behaved civilly. No, they're ready to beat each other up. Check this out, verse 41 of Mark 10. It says, when the other 10 disciples heard about this, they became indignant with James and John. A brawl is about to break out. My dear friends, this could be a teachable moment. And so Jesus calls a huddle. He calls all of the 12 in and says, we gotta have a conversation about what's going on right now. And it leads us to part 2 of the conversation, which is 2 ways. 2 ways. There is this way, and there is another way, and these 2 ways are radically different from each other. So way number 1, Jesus starts with this in verse 42. He says that Jesus called them together and said, so he calls a huddle, right? And I wonder if he's getting eye contact with them as he's teaching them at this pivotal moment. And he says, you know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles, the non-Jews, the Roman government that had taken over Judea, you know those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority, what? Over them. There's this feeling of superiority over and above, and therefore looking at others condescendingly and inferiority. And he just began the statement by saying, you know. He says, maybe just look around. I don't have to tell you this. I don't have to explain this. You already know this. You already know that people who claim positions of authority in our power do it in order to rise above, in order to look down. The way of Rome is about taking. It is about getting. It is about grabbing. And they didn't have to look far to visibly, physically see this. Jesus is traveling with his disciples. He's traveling down the Jordan River Valley. Anyone remember the name of the town, the city that they are about to come upon? Anyone want to take a stab at it? It's Jericho. As you passed through Jericho and then headed up the hill toward Jerusalem, you would have to walk past this structure. It was one of Herod's palaces. It was a winter palace. So, that's where Herod the Great's palace was. No. He had one in Jerusalem. He had one south of there in Masada along the Dead Sea. He had one in Caesarea. This was one of half a dozen palaces that Herod the Great had. And he's walking with his disciples and he says, don't you understand the way of Rome? Don't you understand? It is to get, it is to seize, it is to take, it is to control, it is to diminish. There's a tax office in Jericho because it's an intersection of roads. We read about a guy named Zacchaeus who's there. He's not only a tax collector, he is called a chief tax collector. As you're walking through Jericho, you see these images of Roman opulence and Roman taxation that were crippling you if you lived in a nearby village. And Jesus goes, that's the way of Rome, and I'm going to call you to another way. Some of the most powerful words in the passage are the next words where Jesus says, not so with you. Read that first sentence with me. Ready? Not so with you. I wonder with what force he said that. You realize there's a way of life that just says, I want to get, grab, control, and take everything I can. And I wonder if he's going, not so with you. That's that way. That's not my way. That's not our way. And instead he says this. He says, instead, I'm going to show you another way. Whoever wants to become what? Whoever wants to become great. This is a conversation about greatness. Whoever wants to become great among you must be your what? Must be your servant. And whoever wants to be what? Whoever wants to be first must be the slave of all. And so you get the cadence here. It's kind of like whoever wants to be great must become the servant. Whoever wants to be first must become the slave. What I love about this passage is that Jesus did not argue with their desire for greatness. He just showed them a different pathway to greatness. Jesus redefines greatness. He says, no, you become great not by rising above and pushing out competitors. You become great by taking a low posture and serving others. And right now, some of you are stressing out because you have a feeling that toward the end of this year, you're in line for a promotion. And you're going like, is Jesus saying I can't take it? I don't know what this is for you, whether it's vice president of marketing and sales, or whether it's chief operating officer, or whether it's lead dog catcher or something, but there's an opportunity here to step up. And you go, is Jesus saying I should grab a mop and a bucket and take the lowest position in this company? I don't think he is. I think what Jesus is saying here is whatever position you rise to, occupy that position with a spirit of humble servanthood. Work for the people that are working for you. Serve the people that are serving you. See, humility, we're talking about humble servanthood. Humility is not the absence of power. Humility is holding your power in the service of others. Humility is not the absence of position. Humility is holding your position in the service of others. Humility is not the absence of authority. Humility is utilizing your authority in the service of others. And Jesus would say, this is greatness. This is how greatness is found. So again, just kind of starting with the word greatness. You remember those words that were around it before? I just need to be heard. I need to be seen. I need to be respected. I need to be important. I need to be influential. I think Jesus would surround it with different words. He says, I need to listen. I need to care. I need to speak the right words of encouragement at the right time. I need to share what I have. I need to give. I need to provide. I need to love. And Jesus would look at us and say, now that, my friends, is a different way. It is an absolutely different way. It is a way of navigating life where we begin to ask different questions. Who can I notice? Who can I bless? Who can I share a sense of importance and inclusion and influence? It's just an absolutely different way to live. It's a spirit, it's a heart and mind of humble servant. It's a radically different way to live. It's a radically different way to view life, and I believe it is a lifetime journey. Just based on the disciples, how difficult it was for them to get this, and this is like conversation number 3 about this issue, I think this is hard to get and easy to lose. But our goal should be slow and steady growth in this area of humble servanthood. So I don't know how better to ask a question than this. This affects you as a person, but it affects us as a people. So the question is, what does it mean to become a great church? What does it mean to become a great church? And I guarantee it is not the size of our attendance, and it is not the size of our budget, and it is not the number of campuses. It is not. Our influence here, the church collected, whether or not we are growing in greatness, absolutely, totally depends on the spirit, heart and mind of humble servanthood. Do we greet guests warmly when they arrive, especially those who are here for the first time and do not know their way? Those individuals whose ministry post is to hold and watch babies in the nursery, do they see this as one of the most important jobs in the entire church? And it liberates first-time parents to actually enjoy and soak in what's in a worship service because they know their child is well taken care of. Does it mean we give a listening ear to children in our children's ministry? And those of us that have the opportunity to serve our youth, our middle schoolers and high schoolers, this is the opportunity to say, listen, I enter this with a spirit of humble servanthood. It's not, I need to be important, I need to be recognized, I need to be thanked, I need to be seen. It's the ability to communicate to an insecure 7th grade girl or 11th grade guy, you are important, I see you, I know you. And Jesus would call that greatness. On the scores of opportunities when we get to open our doors and serve families in a funeral, and this family, they're strangers. They're not even people we know, and we're able to give our best in serving them. You've had a long day and you show up to lead a small group and you go, God, I would just say, help me bring what I have, but I feel like I got nothing here. And you just ask God for an extra measure of grace to be able to lovingly serve those individuals who are under your care, if it's a group of 8 or a group of 10 or a group of 12. Okay, some go, oh, I get it. This is about volunteerism. It's not. Because, my friends, it is possible to show up and serve with a stinky attitude. Ask me how I know this. I know because I've read about it. I know because I know personally. It's possible to show up and be self-absorbed. It's possible to show up and go, it is about me, it is about me. And this is so about the mind and it is so about the heart. Because it is possible to enter a church serving opportunity, to volunteer, and yet to volunteer with an edge, to volunteer with an arrogance, to volunteer with this feeling of self-superiority, self-focus, self-centeredness. And Jesus would just look and say, listen, no, okay, thank you for showing up, but that's not what we're after here. It's about the heart. It's about the heart, it's about the mind. It's about cultivating a heart of humble servanthood. However powerful this is in the reflection when the church is gathered, this is massive as the church is scattered. This next map where we are deployed over countless schools, hospitals, and neighborhoods, families, job sites, exercise facilities, and restaurants, hundreds of thousands of potential interactions during the week. This is massive here. The guy's finishing up his last year of college for accounting. He walks outside and it is one of those transcendently beautiful winter days. You know when you get like 5 inches of snow the night before and it is a winter wonderland. Much more appreciated in December than in April, I concede. But it's just winter wonderland. And he starts his car, like on street parking, no garage action with the 4 guys that he rents a house with. And then, you're acquainted with one of these? In our fine state, he is to brush off the roof, brush off the front window, the windshield, brush off the back window. And just the thought occurs to him, whoever will be great will be the servant of all. Checks out the car behind him on the street. He's got time. It's a Saturday morning. He's off to a coffee shop to get some stuff done. Does the roof, does the windshield, does the back. Okay, car in front of him, windshield, roof, back. Cost 10 minutes, and nobody saw and nobody knew, but he saw and he knew. This is a way to change your city and your neighborhood. Maybe, maybe not. This does change you. Listen to me. Sometimes we want to change the world because we can't change us. And Jesus goes, listen, pause, please. Let's just start with your heart. Let's just start with your mind. Let's just start with your snow brush and see where it goes in you. The crazy thing is, often this spirit does cascade. It can be contagious. She's a server at a restaurant and she's good at it. Really nice restaurant. She is gracious and she is kind and she is cheerful when she is at the table. Those of you who serve, do you ever have challenging tables? Problem tables? Front of the house, cheerful, gracious, kind. Back of the house, what a bunch of idiots. And a thought occurs to her one day, am I really serving them if I am gracious and joyful in their presence, and then when I'm in the back of the house, I'm condescending and demeaning? Because I'm not sure that serves them well. And so she has learned a tactic. When she gets back and someone says, interesting table, just a smile, a raise of the eyebrows, and a nod. No need to talk about what dysfunction she witnesses with table 16. This is that rare and unusual skill, this habit of the heart that just goes, it's not about, I'm here to serve, I'm here to serve. It's not about me, it's not about me, it's not about me. Look at that little interaction. It's greatness. I'm telling you, it's greatness. It may or may not change the culture of this fine dining establishment. It does begin to change her. This is the couple. They have had a killer year in their little business. I mean, it's this husband and wife, and they got like 8, 10 employees, people that work for them. They were hanging on by their fingernails for a couple years. This year, they crushed it. And they're closing in at the end of the year. They find themselves sitting at a table, and they decide that they're going to write some Christmas checks, bonus checks. They've never given bonuses before. There's never been a possibility, the margin to write bonus checks before. But here they are, and they go, we simply want to share. We simply want to bless those who have blessed us. We simply want to serve those who have served us. They find themselves at their dining room table, literally writing some Christmas cards, and we wanted to bless your family at Christmas with some enclosed checks. And I believe that Jesus would look on that situation and he would say, this is greatness. It is serving those. It is using humble servanthood, using your position, holding your position in the service of others. It is a powerful, powerful, powerful thing. And it is not, there is another way. There are two ways. Jesus says, powerful words, not so with you, not my followers. That's not my way. And you think, okay, case closed, done now. He's not. He's got one last thing to say. Starts with a conversation of two thrones. It turns to a conversation of two ways. And now it's a conversation about one Lord. And he says, I just need to remind you once again about what I am about. Now, in this whole conversation about serving, humble servanthood, the verse you are about to see, Mark 10:45, is one of the most powerful verses. Some of the most powerful statement, I think, uttered by Jesus on this topic, where Jesus says this. He says, often he called himself the Son of Man. So he's talking about himself. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life a ransom for many. Can you do something with me? Can you read that? Can you read that one with me? Ready? For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. See, Jesus knows where he's headed. And this is mission. This is a mission statement. He says, if you're wondering why the God of the universe would enter the planet in human form, he says, this is why I came. This is what I'm doing here. The Son of Man did not come to be served. The Son of Man came to serve and to give up his life. And that give up his life a ransom for many. This is what will happen in Jerusalem, I believe, the next week. This is God. This is the self-humbling of God. This is God coming in a manger to peasant family. God, dusty, foot-washing God, broken and bleeding God. And Jesus simply reminds him, this is my way. The Son of Man did not come to serve, did not come to be served, but to serve and to give up his life as a ransom. A ransom is something that you would pay like for the release of a slave. In order to set a slave free, you would pay a ransom price. Jesus is saying, I am going to pay a debt that you could not pay in order to free you. In order to give up his life, a ransom for many. Jesus would say, this is my way and I want to call you into it. This is my heart and I want my heart to be your heart. This is my mindset and I want my mindset to become your mindset. This is my life and I want to invite you into my life. I give and serve and give. It's why I came. Some of the most powerful words of a follower of Christ are these: I'm here to serve. It's why I was made. It's why I was born. It's why I'm here. I'm here to serve. Let's say it together. Ready? I'm here to serve. One more time. I'm here to serve. Let's end where we started. We started by talking about, Tom Petty's Free Fall, and it just, loves Jesus, loves Elvis, loves horses, her boyfriend, and Jesus just kind of gets mashed up with everything else. It's a kind of a blurred image of Jesus, and often people who come to Christ don't come to him at all. They come to a caricature of him. And often people who are walking away from the faith are walking away from a Jesus that's not Jesus at all, but a caricature of Jesus. And what I've been trying to express today and what I've been trying to express throughout this series is simply this: he's worthy of our trust. When we get clear on who Jesus was, what he did, and what he longs for us to become, the faith that you embrace is a faith worth having. And the trust that you express, Jesus is worth trusting. So we're gonna prepare for a time of brief time of communion together. Let me ask you to stand right here and at our campuses as well. And let me ask our worship teams to come on out. We're gonna sing a beautiful old faithful song. Just says, Jesus paid it all to him I owe. It's what he gave, it's what we give. Then we'll have this time of communion together. Gracious God, we give thanks for this day. We give thanks for your presence with us. And we ask you to call out in us, to forge us, to mold us, to transform us into the people you created us to be. We ask this in the name of Jesus, our Lord.